use the conventional Python files we've been using, like these ones. So we can create a Python file, then type in our code. But today I'm going to use something else. Okay, I'm going to use a Jupyter notebook, so that you also get the experience of how to use Jupyter notebooks in VS Code. Okay, before you can do that, before you can use Jupyter notebooks in VS Code, you have to go to your just um, okay, sorry for that. Our prof called, um, Prof. AJ. He called to find out about how the class is going, so I had to answer. Sorry for that. And so you can skip that video. I know I'm not doing it professionally. So I'm just trying to show you how to navigate your Jupyter notebook. Okay, it's quite simple. The same way you create a Python file here, let me call it trials.py. Now I can write my code here, print, and I write my hello. Let me just say, okay, I write my hello here. Now this is one Python file. If I need to write a different set of code, I have to go and create another Python file, especially when they are not related. I have to go and create another Python file and say maybe, let me say trials2.py, and that one, let's say it has print, maybe I love programming. So let's assume that both of them, trial 1 and trial 2, are two different sets of code. Okay, now I can just simply create one. If you are learning, okay, usually we use Jupyter Notebook in studies. Okay, when you are learning how to program, then it becomes easier to make notes in Jupyter Notebook. So I just say maybe trials notebook. Usually I use it for my studies. Python notebook, IPy notebook NB. So the extension is .ipynd. Okay, so once I create that, I get a cell. Okay, so whatever I wrote in trials 1, let's say this code print hello, I can actually have a cell and say print hello. Okay, then I can create another cell. Then when I come down here, I click on code, I can create another cell and write my other codes here. Print I love programming. Okay, so print I love programming. So this one becomes very useful when you are learning a new topic. And as you are learning the new topic, let's say it keeps on changing. You keep on changing, the content keeps on changing, and you need to write different codes for different topics. Okay, now Jupyter makes it more easier. So maybe this topic is talking about a print statement. Maybe you can have another topic here. Maybe this code is, maybe you are using this code to see how you can maybe enter your email. Okay, so you are using this code to see how you can use the input function. This code is for how to use the print function, and the whole thing I'm learning about is functions. Okay, so I'm able to write codes in different cells and I can run them separately. I get an output here separately from this, just as when I take this cell, this trials.py, and I run the code, and I run it here, I get my output here, hello. The same way, if I do it in Jupyter Notebook, I get my output down here. And if I take this one too, let me change it to print, whatever it is. Okay, let me just say email. Okay, then let me say print email. Okay, so this is a different set of code. I can run it separately. Since I'm using the input statement, a box will appear here for input, which is I can put in an email kwke445 at, let's say, outlook.com, and I press enter, and I get my response down here. So every code block you get a response beneath it. Okay, just as you can run these codes separately in different files and you get their response in the terminal down here. Okay, so you don't need to be creating more files when you are learning one topic. Okay, so that is why I want us to use a Jupyter notebook. Okay, codes on typecasting. Okay, then here, so this is just some notes. Okay, when you click on this, it appears as like a note, and this appears like a code. So you can be making notes whilst you are coding. Okay, even though you can still use what's what's it, comments. You can use comments, but the markdown makes it more nice. So maybe you can add some markdown here. Maybe here I can just say um, using the input function. Okay, markdown here. So maybe here using the print function. Okay, let me change this one. Topic, maybe the topic is common Python functions. Okay, common Python functions. So this one helps me to make notes. Okay, so common Python functions. First, using the print function, then I write some code. Using the input function, I write some code. So the Jupyter Notebook is an easy way of really studying, and it really helps. At the end of the day, you can even convert it into a PDF and print it out and get it like a handout. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you. And or from here, so when you click on sign up, oh, okay, so I'm still online. Sorry, I was just checking. Okay, so let me continue with what I was doing. So I've showed you how the Jupyter Notebook platform works. So first and foremost, let me go to HackerRank and let us attempt to solve the problem. Okay, so the problem was fairly simple. So you see here solve challenge or solve or something. Then this is challenge discussion, then challenge leaderboard, then challenge submissions. Okay, so when I click try again, that's if you've solved it once. And the locked you see here is saying that any further submission will not be considered for leaderboard because it is past the deadline. Okay, so once it's past the deadline, you see this red thing, and when you submit, it's not going to come. So if you are submitting your work very late, then I'm sorry, I will never receive the data. Okay, so the project was simple. You've been tasked to develop a software that would extract the name section of a user email address, general email format, name section at domain. Okay, so that is your task. Your task is they will give you an email address, whoever, the user, the computer, it could be anybody, an API, or from the internet, or wherever you are getting your data from. An email will be given, and we want to extract the name section of the email. If you check um, if you check this place, okay, I'll leave it for now. You realize that the name section is what we need. Okay, so they say input format. The computer will input an email which is in the what string format. Now constraints make use of the properties and methods of strings to arrive at a solution. Okay, so there are many ways to do it, but I want to see you guys using some properties and methods associated to strings to be able to come up with the answer. Okay, but even if you are unable to use these properties, you can still go ahead and use whatever you want to use, because at the end of the day we are all still learning. Okay, we're still learning, and it's not compulsory to stick to one method even though you are going to fail. Okay, so output format, so they are saying that this is the format of the input. It's going to be purely a string. Now the output, the format of the output the computer is expecting is display only the name section of the email. That is the output format. So the computer is expecting that if you type in, or if an email address such as, let's say, kk47 at gmail.com is being provided to your software will only return kk47 and leave the at gmail.com out. Even if it is at outlook.com, it should leave the at outlook.com out. If it is at icloud.com, the at icloud.com should not be part of the name. So you are only cutting a certain section of an email address that is from the beginning to a certain point. But that point where you are cutting may not be known, because all email addresses do not have the same name or the same length. So you cannot say maybe cut the first 5 or cut the first 11. And that was what most of you guys were doing. You guys were slicing from the beginning to the 11th position, because the sample input here, this address, had the at sign was on the 11th position. So most of you guys were cutting from the beginning to the 11th position. But then it becomes problematic when you change the email. So let's say we input another email which says ama24 at gmail.com. Now, ama24 at gmail.com, it's not the same as kobna edu10 at gmail.com. There are two different emails. So if you tell the computer to always cut the email from the first position to the 11th position for all emails, you might not end up getting the user name. You might get a portion of it, but that portion might not necessarily be the entire username, because it could be half of it, it could be all of it could be too much of it. Do you get it? So your code should be universal. It shouldn't be restricted to only this. So then it says sample output. So the sample output is this sample input and sample output you see here are just guidance. They're just telling you that if we input something like this email, we should output something like this. Okay? If we input something like this email, then the output should appear like this. But it doesn't mean that when you are done with your work and you finally submit it, all the 7 test cases are going to be the same email. The emails are going to vary, but your code should be able to fish out the username part and submit it for checking. So explanation, the email entered by the computer has two parts. The name section, which is shown, followed by an @ sign, then the domain name, which is gmail.com. Your code should print out only the name section. Remember that the domain name could vary and would not always be gmail.com. So there can be also different domain names. I have at Yahoo, iTunes, or do they have anything like at iTunes? No, no, no. So at dot com, it could be a dot com. It could be that's going to be sent. But there's one thing we do know. We know that every email, the username portion and the domain portion is separated by an @ sign. So for example, if I take an email, for example, if I take this email, an email such as this, it has two parts. This is the username part, and this after the @ sign is the domain part. So it means that the @ sign becomes the point that divides the username part and the domain part. Once you've established that knowledge, all your work becomes simple. Okay, your entire work becomes simple. So then the question is, how do I fish out this? So let me use method 1. Okay, there are many methods to do this. So with method 1, I can simply, since it's a string, okay, since it's a string, I can simply split it. So I can say that I can say the username is equal to the email dot split. And what am I splitting by? I'm splitting with the @ sign. The @ sign is my symbol for splitting. That's where the computer should split. Now, once the computer splits at the @ sign, the whole thing changes to this. Now, I'm putting a hashtag, it's not a code. So the whole thing becomes in two parts. This part becomes, and the other part becomes this. Okay. So when it's split by the @ sign, the @ sign in between them vanishes and they form a list with two components, the username part and what? And the username part and the domain part. Okay. But then we need this part. We need this part, the username part. So since we need the username part, our solution becomes simple. So we just say print, and I showed you how to slice. Okay. Even though so now here we have two components. I told you in Python programming, the first one is in position 0, the second one is in what? Position 1. So say username, then slice position 0. Okay. Now when you look at this, when I run this code, it says congratulations, you have passed the sample test case. Click the submit button to run your code against all the test cases. So there are other test cases, but we want to know if your code is smart enough to be able to catch up with the other test cases. Okay, so this means that you don't have to limit yourself to only one email address. For all you know, this can only solve one email address. Once you change the email address, or once you change the email address or you input a different email address into your system, it won't work or it might not work. Oh, wait, let me check. Yeah, it may work. Yes. So the way I've written it here, it might work. Okay. But I'll show you how. But for now, focusing on this email address is not the best. It is not the only email address in the whole world. Okay. So your output. So this is what your program produced. Now, in case you made a mistake, let's say here you're supposed to bring a quote and you made a mistake, you didn't bring the quote. Now, take note, your output, then this is expected output. So this is the input, this is the email that was pushed into your code. Then on the next line tells us, the next one, which is your output, tells us that when this was inputted, this is what your code gave us. Then expected output also tells the computer that this is what the computer is expecting. So your output is what your code brought. Expected output is what the computer was expecting. Now, if what the computer is expecting and what your code submitted are the same, then you get the full marks. So for example, if I say print username, okay, and I put a comma, and I put an empty string here, let me say an empty space here, okay, and I run this code, I'm going to get everything wrong, okay. So what you see here, file blah 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 unterminated string literal, okay. So I get an error here, exit status 1, that means it has exited, okay. So we have to make sure that our code is correct so that our message here will be the output we intend for it. At sign and submit whatever it found, okay. Oh, there's a double quote here, sorry. Then I run it again. Now, sometimes you can do it a million times before you get it, okay. It's all part of the experience. It's all part of the experience. So here, when I put in an input function, the computer was able to make an input into my code, and that input was this, the email address, that email address over there. Then with that email address, my code was able to cut out Kobina Edu 10 from the email address, and the computer was expecting that we cut out Kobina Edu 10. So since the expectation of the computer and my expectation has been met, then the code is good to go. Okay. So when I submit, I click on submit code. Say yes. Now the computer runs the code against all the 7 test cases. Okay. Against all the 7 test cases. Sometimes you can let me download one of the test case. I don't know. So expected output or input. So let's see expected input. So from this test case, if you take a look here, you realize that the email address is what? Amwabinsamson at live.com. So this one might not be gmail.com. So if you programmed your computer to work with gmail.com, then you'll be having a problem. Okay, so this is not what with gmail.com. Okay, and there are more, and I think most of you have problem with the 7th test case, this one. So let me try and download its input. So the 7th test case, with the 7th test case, it didn't have any @ sign. In fact, The seven test case wasn't an ideal email address. So your computer was supposed to return the same thing. Okay, so it assumes that whatever is there is the user part. Because for an email address, the user part with an @ sign then a domain. Now, if the @ sign is missing and that means there is no domain, that means whatever is there is what a username part. Okay, that's why most of your code wasn't able to address that, because I don't know how you wrote it, but frankly, maybe you included it at gmail.com inside your code, and because it failed you, it was not getting you were not getting it correct, you were getting runtime error. Okay, so let me check. I just want to check to see if I'm live. Okay, so please like the video and give some comments and things so that we can open in editor. I also want to show you another way to do the work. Oh, so try again. Now from here, I can write a different code. Okay, I can write a different code. And let me show you what some people did. Some people rather did this. They type this and they type, let's say, let me just do ja at, let's say, yahoo.com. Okay, and they counted j, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the @ sign is on position 8, and what they did instead was from here say, okay, sorry for the noise. Okay, so the noise has died down. So from here you can see that I got it wrong. My output was what? Ja binding, and the expected output was what? This. Now the fact that is the expected output doesn't mean um your code shouldn't be universal, or your code should be strictly producing this. Okay, so that's I'm just trying to show that some of you this side was really confusing. You wanted to write your code specifically for this, okay, but I also wanted you to write your code that is universal enough. So if we put in this KOBINAADU 10 at gmail gmail.com, and we run this code again, it's going to tell us congratulations. Oh, what did I miss? Okay, I only cut from 1 to 8. So you realize that my output was short. Okay. Now, let me cut, I think it's 11. From what I saw from people's work, that's going to be 11. And when I run the code, I'm going to get congratulations, you have passed the sample test case, because I know the position of the at sign. So I was able to count and put the 11 here. Okay, I was able to count and put the 11 here, and it worked fine. But then when I submit it, yes, submit my code. But when I submit it, I get all the test cases wrong, because for all the test cases, the at sign may not be in the same position at position level. Let's look at test case 1. Now, when you look at test case 1, we see Amoabeng Samson. And when you have to count, you have the A at position 0, M at position 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Then the at sign is on 15. So all email addresses do not have the same length. So the at sign will not be at the same position. So you have to be very particular about that. Okay. So if you use this solution, it isn't universal enough. This solution wasn't universal enough. Okay. So instead of you telling the computer that put 11 here, you rather tell the computer to find the position of the at sign and put it here. So that can be an alternate way of solving it. Okay. So instead of me putting it the 11 here because I counted, I can simply say that maybe a comment, maybe finding the position of the at sign. Okay. So finding the position of the at sign, I will say email dot index. Remember the index function at. So then I assign it to a number. So let me call it position. Okay. So finding the let me say slicing the email. So this one finds the position of the at. So instead of you counting here, you can use the index method for strings to find the position of a particular character, such as the at. And once you find that position, you say that the email should be sliced from the beginning, which is 0, till the position of what? The at sign, which is called position. From the position of the at sign with a step of 1. So by default, with a step of 1. And now when I run this, it's also going to solve this problem for me. So it has been able to solve. So the computer located where the at sign is and cut from the beginning before till the at sign and produce the result. Okay. But then if I submit this code, still it isn't universal enough. All of them will be wrong, or yes, all of them will be wrong. So all of them were wrong because I've restricted my code to this email address. I said email is equal to this. So no matter what the computer does, no matter what email the computer wants to input, the email address is fixed. Okay. So you have to make the email address open, where the user can enter his or her own email address by putting in what? The input function. Okay. So when I use this method, I realized that test case 7 was not solved. Okay. Now I'm really spending time on this because it helps in thinking. Test case 7 was not solved. Why do you think so? If you take a look at test case 7, if you take a look at oh, if you take a look at test case 7 is Microsoft at dot limited dot ga. The at is not the right at sign. So what we're expecting is that since there's no at dot live.com or at yahoo.com or at gmail.com, since there's nothing like that, your computer, your program should retain the same what address or whatever that it got. Now, if you are telling the computer to locate the at sign in here, what do you think we will get? If you try to locate an at sign or any symbol in a string where it doesn't exist, you will get back nothing. Okay, so what you get back will be 0, or I think no, you get back -1. I think so. So I'm coming. I think this is what we are using. So what you get back is not what is expected here. Okay, that is why this method, so those who use this method actually had some, I think the score was 0. No, it's not supposed to be 0. It's supposed to be at least some score. I think I'll check on that. I'll check on that because for project 1 there were scores assigned to each of them. So you losing this doesn't mean it should be 0. Yes, I'll check on that. So let me go back. So from here, this method is not efficient enough. It cannot solve all the test problems that we had. So the best method was what I did before. That is to say, I'm going to write the best method for you guys. But this time around, I'm going to my Visual Studio Code and I'll write the code here. Then I'll show you how you send your code to HackerRank. There are 2 methods. You can just copy and paste or you upload your code. Okay, so let me go and write the code on Visual Studio Code. Then let's see. So let me say hackerrank.py. Let me name it like that. Now I'm going to first ask for the email address. Okay, so then I'll just say email. Some of you will do this. Input. For the sake of yourself, you can put in your enter your email. Okay, here you can do it. It doesn't matter. It will not give you any wrong or right. Then let me zoom out. Yeah, sorry, zoom in. So then when I get the email, the next thing I have to do is to split. I can use the split. So we can have now the new email is equal to the old email dot split. Okay, split with a what? At sign. Okay, so we split with the at sign. Then once we are done splitting with the at sign, we just print out what? Email, the first part of the email. Okay, so this is the email. We take the email from the user, we split it with the at sign, and we take the first part of the email because the username comes first. Okay, now when I run this one here, I can type this one. Okay, so then I get my correct answer, and I can rerun it again, and let me check if we are still online. Okay, okay, so from here I can also run it again and put in a different, maybe Microsoft official at gmail.com. Okay, it gives me Microsoft official and remove the at gmail.com. So my code is working here. Now because I'm going to upload the code to HackerRank, there is no need for me to put in this question. Okay, it's going to give me an error, but I'll leave it there and run it so that you can see the errors you guys were making. I'm really spending much time on this because I will not be going over project again. Okay, so from here we can go to our HackerRank website. Then when you come here, instead of typing the code here, you can simply do copy and paste, copy, Control C, then paste, Control V. That's all. And you can run this, and I'm going to get an error. Now, the reason I'm getting an error is because your expected output, the computer printed enter your email into your expected output because you put enter your email here. That is why I said you should remove it. When you remove it and you leave your input function blank, when you run it, you get the correct answer. Okay. Now, another way is to upload. You can, instead of copying and pasting, you can also say upload as file. Okay. So upload a file will replace the current content in your code editor. Would you like to continue? Then skip this alert next time. Yes, I'd like to continue. So source file, then I select my source file. I go to where is my source file located on my desktop, my py4 codes. Then I called it what? HackerRank. Yes. So I click on open. Then it says auto detect language, but you can just say Python 3. Then you say upload. Now once you click on upload, by default, it brings your code here for you. Okay. So you can write your code in Visual Studio Code, then you upload it here. Okay. So from here, you can remove the string inside the input function. Now some of you remove this part, leaving the quotes inside, which will affect your answer sometimes. So remove everything including the quotes. So you run it, you see congratulations. Congratulations doesn't mean you have won. Simply means you've done what you've been able to actually solve one problem, then you submit. Okay. Okay. So that being said, now let us go to today's topic. We are left with 30 minutes. And today's topic, we can finish it in 30 minutes. Okay. So let me go straight to this. Then I do my slideshow. Typecasting. So when you say typecasting, you simply refer to converting one data type into the other. Okay. So for example, you have a string, but the string kind of look like a number, and you want to convert it to an integer or a float. Sometimes you can have some integers and you want to convert them into floats. You can have some boolean, you want to convert them into integers, and so on and so forth. So you can have different data types, but then you need them to be other data types which they aren't. So use this typecasting to change the type of the data you are dealing with. Okay. So let me let me so typecasting. Now we are going to focus on 5 functions. You see all the data types I taught before, they all have their typecasting functions. Okay. So for strings, we use str, then we open bracket and close bracket. I taught you how to type functions, simple ones, how to deal with common functions in Python. The name, open bracket, a parameter, and close bracket. We have the int function, the float function, the boolean function, the list function, the dict function, a lot of them. They are all functions that can help you convert a data type into a string. The int function help us convert any data type, some data types into an integer. So for the int, you cannot convert floats into integers. You cannot convert some floats into, or most floats into integers. Like for example, 6.5. How can you convert 6.5 into an integer? Is it going to be 7 or is it going to be 6? If it's going to be 6, what happened to the 0.5? If it's going to be 7, then where from the extra 0.5? So it's quite difficult sometimes to convert float into integer, but you can convert a float like 3.0 into an integer 3, because that one is convertible. Okay, but if the float has a decimal point behind it, then you can convert it into an integer. We also look at list. You cannot also convert list into an integer. Let's say you have a list of apples, oranges, bananas, then you want to convert apple, oranges, bananas as a list into an integer. It won't work. Even if you have a list of numbers, let's say you have a list that contains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a list. And you want to convert to an integer. What number would it be? What number represents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? No, nothing. So we cannot convert lists into integers. So we cannot use the int function for list on list. Okay. Then we have the float, which converts data type into a decimal number, including integers. So if you have an integer, it is easier to convert an integer into what? A float. But it is difficult sometimes, or it is impossible sometimes, to convert floats into integers. All integers can be converted to floats by putting a 0.0 behind it, but not all floats can be converted to an integer, except, or let me say, floats cannot be converted to an integer to integers, except those that end with 0.0. Okay. Then we have boolean. So you can convert any other data type into a true or false. Okay, so we'll learn how to do that. Then we have a list, which converts other data types into a list. Okay, so when we keep on typecasting, these are some few codes on each of them. Then we'll talk about using the type function. Okay, now the function called type, what it does is that it tells us the data type you are working with. Let me show you why it's important. Okay, escape. Let us go to Visual Studio. Okay, let me close this one. Let me open a new one. So let me just say tutorials.ip Python notebook. Okay, so I'm creating a Python notebook so that I use that. So the first thing I want to show you is using the type function to determine using the type function using the type function to determine the data type you are working with. So sometimes you might be working with different forms of data type, okay, and you might not really know. Okay, for example, if I have a variable called x is equal to 15, and I have another variable y is equal to 15, now you realize that because we can see our code, we know that this one is a string, and we know that this one is an integer. Okay, but see what happens when I print them out. So I say print x and y separate by the enter key. Okay, forget about what I wrote at the last end. Okay, so when I run this, what I get is 15, 15. Now, what do you see about the output here? You realize that the output doesn't look different. They all look the same. The 15 on top is for x, and the 15 at the bottom is for y. Or simply put, instead of putting this one here, I can simply write two print statements. Let me just write two print statements to avoid confusion. Okay. So when I run this again, I get 15, 15. So we can't really tell which of the 15s you are seeing down here. Okay. Now, if you hide the code, you can't really tell which of the 15s is a string and which of the 15 is a float. Okay. And since, sorry, it's an integer, and since we can't tell, that is where the type function comes in. So we can say using the type function to determine their data type. Okay, so from here, what we can do is that we would now say that, let me comment this one out. So from here, we would say that, let me just print what? Type, print type of x. Okay, let us print the type of x. Now I've commented this print statement out, so they will not work. So let us see. Now when we run it, the output we get is what? Class int. Class int simply means that the data you are working with is an integer. Okay, that's class int. The data you are working with is an integer. Now when I say print type of y, shows what? Class string. So it belongs to the string class. Let me even put the variables themselves here. X, y. So realize that this 15 is an integer and this 15 is a string. Okay, so the type function helps us to what? Identify the data type we are working with. Now let us go into typecasting and let us see. Let me create a new code here. So here we are going to see how to convert other data types into strings. Okay, so we want to convert other data types into strings. So we have so let us have one data type. Let's say, let me say x here would be 15, 15, which is an integer. Okay, we already know it's an integer. Then we can have y, maybe you make it 6.89, which is a float. Then we have z, and z, let's make it boolean. So you have true. Okay, then let us have another variable. Let's say a. Let's make it a string. Okay, so a we have so for a we have, let's say, hello. Okay, we have hello. Now with these data types, let us look at uh, the string, the str function. And the str function helps us to convert other data types into what? Strings. So if I say let me say new underscore x, the new x, and I say str and I put in x. Now this string function converts x into a string and assign it to new x. So let's print new x. Print new x, comma. Now the type of what? X. Type of new x. Okay. So this is, it should print what? New x, and, or let me just say new. Let me use the word new for a reason. So new is equal to the string version of x. So print the new and print the type of new. But before we print the new, we also want to print the old. So let me say print into bracket. Let me just put some string called old type. Okay. So then that one we print x and we print the type of what? X. X. Okay. But then here we convert the x, which is an integer here. Here it's an integer. We convert it into a string by using the str function. Then we print what? New type, which we don't know. Then we print the data and print the data type. Okay. So if we run this, we'll see what happens. Let's see what happens. So if you run this, you realize that old type is 15. The class is what? Integer. Now the new type is 15. The class is what? String. After passing it through the string class. Sorry, the string function. Okay. So this str function helps us to convert from one data type to the other. So we can put in, instead of putting in x, we can put in y. Sorry. So realize that y, let me put in y here, and let me put in y here. So you realize that y is what? A float. So let us try and convert the float y into an integer. Okay. So when I run this, you see old type 6.89 class float, new type 6.89 class string. Okay. Now we can do same for z. Z is what? A boolean. Okay. Now when we put in z and we put in z and we put in z, old type true class boolean, new type true class string. So now the word true has been converted to a string true. Okay. So you have to also take note. Then let us convert string to string. Converting a string to string, nothing will happen. But it just becomes more string. So old type hello class str, new type hello class str. Nothing happens. Okay. So that's for the string. Now let us focus on now let me change this instead of rewriting the whole thing. Let me change this. And now let us explore int. Okay. So int. Okay. So with the int, we have now let us try and convert the first x is already an integer, so we'll not waste time on it. And let us try and convert y, which is a float, into an integer, and let's see what happens. So we change here y, then we change here y. So when I run this, we get an error. Oh wow. Okay. So then there's been an update. Yes. Because in previous Python versions, um, this is going to give us an error. Okay, when you try and convert a float into an integer, you're going to get an error. And so we usually convert all numbers into floats. But now I think they've Python 3.12 they've okay to round it to the nearest, or to round it down to the nearest okay, that's interesting. So Python is updating. In my experience, this wasn't correct initially. It was going to give us an error, but now they've changed it. Well, it's good. So from here we see that we have, let me check if I'm still online. Mm, okay, so I'm still online. So then let me continue. So from here we realize that it's converted into float, but what it did is that it removed the decimal points. Okay, so that's the new trend. So it removed the decimal point. Then we can also look at how we can convert the boolean true into want to convert the boolean true, which is z, into an integer. So when we put in z, so says int z, convert z, which is true, into what? an integer, what we get, let me put z here and let me put z here. Okay, so when you run it, what we get is that the old type is what? True, which was what? A boolean. But then the new type is 1, which is what? An integer. So for boolean, when you convert a boolean, okay, into an integer, you get either 1 or 0. Okay, so if it was false, let me change it to false. Okay, and I run it, I'll get a 0. So false gives us a 0. Okay, so if you convert any boolean, true or false, into an integer, true is 1, false is 0. So if you remember, I talked about it in our first class. Yes or no, true or false, 1 or 0. So in MATLAB doesn't have true or false, but MATLAB would yield when you do a boolean type of operation. Okay, in MATLAB you rather get 1 or 0. You not get true and false. So in Python you see true and false, and when you convert these true and false into numbers, because MATLAB is basically numerical lab, meaning like it deals with numbers, purely mathematical. So when you convert this true and false into numbers, then you get your 1 and 0. Just like MATLAB also yields 1 and 0. So you have to also take note of that. So let us use the int function to convert a string. Definitely is going to give us an error. Hello, what's the number for hello? I don't think so. So, oh, sorry. Int, then let us put in an A. Okay. So when we run this code, we get an error. So when you see value error means that the value you input into the function is not accepted. Invalid literal for int with base 10. Hello. How can you convert hello to base 10? So it can't be worked. But if it's base 16, no, base 16 you still can't convert hello. Because for base 16 we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A, now 10, number 10 is A, number 11 is B, number 12 is E, sorry, B, number 12 is C, 13 D, 14 E, 15 what? F. Then, so it has A, B, C, D, E, F as part of the numbers. So then you can see a number like 2B, 2B1F, which is a number in base 16. So if we're converting to a base 16 and we have letters like, let's say, ABA, ABA, the computer will be able to convert ABA into base 16, where A is 10, B is 11, then the next A is also another 10, giving you some huge number. Okay, so we should understand that, yes. So you cannot convert strings into integers. Now the next function we'd look at is we've looked at strings, we've looked at integers. Now let us look at floats. Okay, so let me change this to floats. And just as floats, you cannot convert strings into floats. It also gives you the similar problem. Could not convert string to floats, value error. So but we can still do into a boolean. And let's say the person entered 22.5, and we are going to get an error because we're trying to convert the 22.5, which is a string like float like this, into an integer, and that's going to give us an error. So we have to change this part and make it an integer. Make an integer the float. So when we run this, let me say 22.5, now it works. So we're able to convert it to a float. Okay, so remember, anytime you take note, the default data type of inputs is a string. Okay, so we've come to the end of today's lesson. Now today's lesson is a full lesson that has been broken down into two. It's actually